I want to welcome you to our discussion on race and the things that have been going on in our society lately. It's just a little bit crazy what's going on. Of course, we're all saddened by the death of George Floyd. It's anytime someone is, mistreated in humanity, it's a real concern for us, and we're deeply saddened by that. The troubling events in Minneapolis, which led, of course, to the riots, led to looting, parts of Seattle being taken, different places in the country. It's really heartbreaking to see that. So in the midst of this, what I wanted to do is communicate with our church family and with anyone else. And we want to have a conversation about race and conversation about reconciliation, about the problem that we Christians have and about our role as peacemakers in this world. So I've asked a college mate to join me, Pete Coulson. I was just a scrawny little freshman back when he was an upperclassman, and I was a little bit shy, and he was up there with it seems like all the other guys, and it seemed like our college was one of inclusivity, but everybody's perspective is a little different. So what I thought we'd do is invite Pete on with us today to tell his story. Pete has an amazing story of how he was born in Austria and how he was raised in an orphanage and how he immigrated to the United States. Pete, why don't you give us a background and tell your story?
Okay, I'll try to sum it up in the best way possible. I think what really has helped me as a person was just the history behind all these situations. I think one of the processes in that is kind of how I ended up in the orphanages. I was born in 1954. The exact date is December 12th, 1954. Me and my twin brother were born. And that was a time when a lot of the occupational soldiers came to Europe to kind of help soften the impacts of World War II. And in that process, a lot of these soldiers had relationships with various women in different situations. We created a lot of mixed race kids. And because of that, a lot of these mothers, because of the fear of what society may think of them, they gave these kids up in different ways, or kids were left in the streets. My brother and I were fortunate enough to be left in the hospital by my mother, and then we were placed in an orphanage about a month later. And in what I've learned about my mother, she had 7 kids.
Wow.
And so she had a son born in 51, a daughter born in 52, a set of twins in 53, a set of twins in 54, and another daughter born in 59.
Wow. And you've reconnected with her or with your family over there?
I reconnected with my brothers through a process of being over there, invited to in 2016, my wife and I were invited to a exhibit in Vienna. And we met a group of people that was kind of a historical setting where a lot of these people were brought together, just kind of share their story. And my short story was unique because of being adopted into a home where a lot of these people that were at this exhibit, they had to survive. They were survival of the fittest.
Wow.
I was blessed just to be adopted, just to be taken into a home. And, people tended to criticize my mother for giving us up, but really that was tough love. That was true love in action. She gave up her own because she knew she couldn't care for her own. And so she allowed other people to have an influence in their lives. And that's what World Missions to Children is the one that ran that orphanage. They ran it in Japan, they had it in Ireland, and in Austria. And the intent was to help these orphans find refuge. And in that process, mom and dad took care of us in that orphanage for 10 years. And so in 1964, they decided, the kids are growing up. There's still a lot of angst about people of color going into college and things like that. So the educational system was not very favorable of mixed race kids coming in. So you could either go into in the industry way or just figure out life, but you could not get into universities. And so mom and dad thought it would be best for us to come to the States where we have better opportunities. Despite there was still unrest in the US, there was unrest worldwide, but I think they recognized that giving us a better opportunity would give us better options in life. And so kind of that's how that all got started. So what I appreciate about my adoption and my orphanage experience was that I had several people giving me instruction how to be disciplined, how to be responsible. The principle was the same, but the delivery was different. Mm. And I think he prepared me for what I was going to face in life and how I was going to face obstacles. And I have phrased the word life-challenging obstacles to life-changing opportunities. And that's kind of been my message for the last few years is how can I help empower people to become the best they can despite the obstacles in their life. And I think the orphanage experience kind of set that foundation for me, not to look at color, but look at character. Mm. Look at the facets of life that help us become the best that we can be. And I think the foundation of the orphanage prepared me for a lot of things that I even face today and allowed me to become a critical thinker in the process of all these challenges in life.
Well, while you were living that life in that orphanage, and I have no idea what kind of life that would be. Looking at some of the video that I saw, it looked like that you truly had some parents who cared for you.
Yeah. Well, all the caretakers cared. I mean, we were blessed by having great caretakers. A lot of mission agencies came in to help us out as Dad was reconstructing the orphanage. So we got exposed to a variety of cultures. Mm. We got exposed to a lot of different people to help us realize that it's about people working together as people and helping for the common good of mankind.
And I was raised in a little island, Alameda, California, and I missed, while we were in our little bubble there was different things going on in the 60s, the unrest in the 60s. We knew that right across the bay, there was a large population of blacks. We had a couple of clashes between the schools, Alameda and Ensenal, where there was a little bit of teeny bit of racial tension, but basically I was raised in a bubble. And then I went to Western Baptist College, and it seemed like an idealistic setting. But you were relating to me the other day that while for me as a little white kid going to that school, there were a lot of questions that were being asked of you as well. And there were some different philosophies swirling in the same theological circles that we walked in.
Yeah, I think that was always a challenge. I think I learned more in my interactions in the dorms and in the lunchroom than I did in the classroom.
Oh, wow.
Because it really helped me apply scripture to my daily walk of life. I think one of the misnomers were a lot of assumptions made. And a lot of people thought I either came from LA or from the Chicago area.
How would you know?
Yeah, how would you know? And they asked these questions and made these assumptions that I like watermelon and chitlins, not realizing that I like sauerkraut and Wiener Schnitzel.
That's just weird.
But those were some of the assumptions people made. Uh-huh. And I could have really said, "Well, don't be so stupid," but that would have been wrong. Mm-hmm. I kind of asked the question, okay, what is it that makes you think what you think? Where are those philosophical concepts coming from? Because here I am, a mixed race person in a Christian college, trying to understand the unconditional love of God so I can impact my community, and you come up with these biased perspectives and these judgmental comments without really knowing who I was or what my history was. And so really caused me to ask the hard questions. And I didn't want to make it a big issue, but it did affect my interaction with people from time to time. And I remember Lou Black, who was the dean of students at the time. I said, Lou, you know, these are things I'm coming up against. And he kindly said to Pete, on those days, remember your blessings far outweigh your challenges. And I've kept that to this day, because we all have challenges in life from all walks of life. And in order for us to be able to impact society, we have to look at, okay, what are our commonalities? And in that process, respect our differences with respect and understanding, but don't put everybody into one pocket of society. Recognize that if you had 20 Pete's, you'd have a pretty miserable society. You
Well, I don't know
need to,
about 20 Pete's, but 20 Dennis's definitely.
and you need to take those intentional risks of engaging, having those conversations. It's like when I would ask a girl out or something, where sometimes would say, well, I like you, but I don't know if my father would approve of this.
You know, that's exactly what women said to me.
Right. It's not, so the bottom line, I think your comment right there is really fundamentally important. It's at all levels.
Yeah.
It's not about race. It's about building those healthy relationships that we can understand each other. And I think even some of the professors made assumptions that I knew the English language well and things like that, when English was my second language. I didn't have the privilege of understanding all the nuances of the English language, because I was thrown into the classroom, okay, you're going to learn English, when German was my first language. And I didn't have any prep professors even sit down and say, Pete, why do you write so weird? I have all these compact sentences and stuff like that. So academically, I really struggled.
Oh.
I was on the dean's list. I mean, I was on the academic probation probably most of my time at Corbin or Western.
Me too.
Because of that very reason.
I had different reasons, but me too. Yeah.
But in that process, it was just a matter, I learned how to listen to people through that process of my own angst about not being academically capable of producing, but recognized that it's not about academics, it's about attitude. Attitude is fundamental, because anybody can get a 4.0, but does your attitude match that 4.0? Has your academic learning infiltrated the heart to make a difference in your local community?
And I think that that's a big deal in what's going on today. And that is, you know, let's face it, we all get hurt feelings. Bad things happen to us. People mistreat us, or at least we perceive they mistreat us. And so we have that choice. Everyone has the choice of how we're going to respond to that. Are we going to end up being hurt, or are we going to move beyond that? So that's really an important thing.
Right. I think in the process, I mean, it's just these issues. I have this concept called inherent emotions. It's probably a humanistic perspective, but I think it happens a lot of times where if you hear something long enough, that becomes your reality. And I think a lot of these young people have heard the stories of the 50s and the 40s and the 30s and act like this is happening today. And they react on yesterday in today's environment. Because yes, there's injustices, but those injustices cross all racial lines, all class lines, all economic concept of society. It's not just a one person or one group epidemic. It's across the world because of our sin nature.
That's what I said yesterday in our message yesterday. So we talked about race yesterday, and we talked about two great scriptural principles that deal with race. But one of the things we said is it's not about skin, it's about sin.
Right. And I think that's so easily forgotten. And I think as I've been approached about a lot of these concepts, it's amazing to me how the church has failed, to be honest. And I
Yeah,
think that's
let's talk about that because, I mean, from my perspective as a pastor of a small church, sometimes I wonder what can I do? What's your perspective on how the church has responded to this kind of thing?
well, it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if you remember when Promise Keepers became a big
I do.
deal back in the
We went
80s.
to a couple Promise Keepers
Right.
conferences.
And there was always this event about reconciliation
Mm.
and all these processes. And Tony Evans was a fourth runner in that. And he has some pretty good material in that. But I think what was lost in a lot of that, don't apologize, act. And I mean, be intentional about building relationships with people, not only of a different color, but even of a different classes, more different economic process in their life. It was interesting how many people came to me that didn't know, but made these assumptions that came up to me after Promise Creep. I've an adopted son. How do we connect?
Mm.
Because that was the challenge all 10 of us had with mom and dad. Here we are with a predominantly white family. They bring us to the United States. We move to Podunk, Idaho. We move up to the farm. We milk 250 cows a day. We dairy farm. And a lot of people perceive that in the neighborhood as slave labor.
Oh, wow.
They had no idea. But I think in a lot of their minds, they're just using us to make money.
Mm.
Mom and dad never shared that with us, but there were a lot of assumptions made in that process. And that's back to, do they understand what's going on behind the scenes? What is their intent? We went to private school, but because of administrative biases of insensitive comments being made, mom and dad took us out of the private schools. Because you had, and I'm not trying to bash Bob Jones University, but they had some issues.
Yeah,
a white path and a black path.
we want to talk about that because in my message yesterday, I just don't see any excuse for race or using color of skin or anything. We're part of the human race. We're all related to Adam and Eve, and all of us are descendants of it. Maybe you got a better tan than I do, and I should be a little jealous about that. But honestly, we're all blood brothers. That was my first point. The second point was, the blood of Christ was shed for us. So while we're brothers, humanity, we have royal blood shed for us. And Jesus died for every person in every color, red and yellow, black and white. But now when you come to the old Bob Jones and they had some differences in theology that created some angst in churches, and they help promote racist attitudes. Maybe you want to address that.
Well, I think that was very prevalent because of what was going back on in that part of the country. And I could never understand even why you have a person that is Caucasian and yet they go out for a tan. It's kind of a paradox. You think about it.
It is.
I mean, but those are the things that I was, okay, you don't agree with me dating your daughter or blah, 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 but your child goes out and gets a tan.
And the darker, to some degree, the darker, the better.
But that's the kind of paradox I was faced with on a daily basis because I'm in a mixed race environment. Mm-hmm. That's the world I live in. So I'm not either black or white. I'm just a human being.
Yeah.
And that's what drives me. And those were some of those questions that were asked of me in college. I would be giving blood, and they said, "What color is your blood?" I mean, that's a naive comment, And my response to that, well, we're all washed in the blood of Christ.
Right.
But
And,
those are some insensitive comments that were made without knowledge who's made.
and I've given blood a couple of times. Um, and what I discovered is when I walked in to give blood, they never asked me what color my skin was.
No.
They said, "Are you white blood? Or are you, German blood? Are you Italian blood?" No, we have common blood running through us, and we're just part of the human race.
Right. And I think we get so lost in some of the DNA of society, we forget about the DNA of God.
Mm.
For God so loved the world. There's no subtitles.
Yeah.
For all have sinned. There's no subtitles.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it from that perspective and recognize that we're all part of the human race, it should dilute that biased thinking.
Mm.
I work with a lot of statistics,
Mm-hmm.
but a boss of mine said to me one day, "Pete, which bias are you going to be biased by?"
Yeah, I think we all have biases. Yeah.
We all have those. And so part of this process, when I talk to people, I have to have these conversations. Okay, where are you coming at in your perspective? What drives your thinking? And what is the foundation of that thinking? And 9 out of 10 times, it was something were told, nothing they thought out.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the basic things I learned at Corbin. I remember Jim Hill saying, try to write Christian without using Christian jargon.
Mm.
That stuck with me for life. Then Joel Aldrich came up with a book called Lifestyle Evangelism.
Right. Read it. Mm-hmm.
What is your life presenting to people that causes them to come to the kingdom?
Mm-hmm.
I went to Corbin to be a missionary, only to realize my mission field starts in my backyard.
Mm.
It starts at the dorm at Corbin University or Western Baptist, because that's where you rub shoulders with people and have a dialogue of challenging conversations to make you who you become, that help mold who you are. And so I got involved with School of McLaren, Hillcrest, and the Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And realized that I don't need to be overseas. I have a hard enough time learning English. But I understand humanity. I understand human nature. I love sports. Why don't you use the sports arena as a mission field? Mm. And for 45 years, I've been a ref and a coach. Mm. And about 5 years ago, I came up with the lifesaver concept because I got so frustrated with parents constantly badgering me or my associate ref about the calls I make. And so I came up with that lifesaver concept. We're here to save lives and help children make wise choices. We can help the process or hurt the process. The choice is yours. And I hand to the parent that's calm, but also hand to the parent that's a little bit obnoxious. But I remind them, there's young eyes watching you. Yeah. How are they seeing us interact in life? And so God has allowed me to use that as a platform to educate people. That's because I'm talking about eternal life when I talk about life. Mm-hmm. They don't know that, but I hope my message brings that across. Yeah. Because that is so fundamentally important. And I was humbled time after time after reffing a game. I don't run out of the gym. I try to interact with parents so they understand what I'm calling. They say, "Are you a believer?" And I say, "Thanks for noticing." Because my reffing style was not about the sport. It was about life. 0.1% of those kids on the court would make it to the professional level, but 100% have the level of life. What am I doing to influence their thinking so they become the best that they can be outside the sports arena.
Hmm.
And so my opportunity as Christian service opened those doors of opportunity for me today. And so I think a lot of this, if people go out and reach out in their communities, rub shoulders with people that maybe not be in their normal sphere of friends, but broaden their horizons, it's amazing the things you might learn.
Well, that's interesting you say that because for the last 20 years, I've been a soccer referee. And
Oh, yep, been there.
and it's a little bit different than basketball refereeing, but you have you're a little wider space, a little bit further away from parents and students, but all the same, there's a lot of similarities. And I was watching you on that video that you do about lifesavers, the news, and I thought, I've really got to do more to bridge the gap than I do. I go out there, I try to do the best job as a referee I can possibly do. I want to be a good witness, but proactively, am I really doing anything that, you're doing something proactive? You're giving out a lifesaver and you're making a statement. And for me, that was a really important thing, thinking that through. What could I do? Maybe I ought to buy some lifesavers myself.
Well, I think when I did soccer in Salem as well, and I would always remind the parents, and I did a lot of flag football, and I tried to create an atmosphere that was empowering.
Mm.
I created special rules for accountability.
Mm.
The parents are 3 yards back further than the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially with young people, you yell your kid's name out, what's he going to do? He's going to turn.
Yeah.
Well, that's a safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
I use it as a safety issue, but also of a practical, let the coach coach,
Mm-hmm.
let the player compete,
Mm-hmm.
let the referee correct,
Mm-hmm.
let the parent cheer.
Mm-hmm.
And keep it in that format. Because in life, we're all in these transitional times in our life. We have to learn to listen to other people outside our parents. That's what the coach is for, and that's what the referee is for. To help take instructions that parents can enhance at home, but listen it from a different purpose and perspective, as I learned in the orphanage. Because the principle was the same, but the delivery was different. And that's what I try to do. And even on the basketball court, there was one time I was working with a little kid and he was being a little knothead. And I asked the mom the next week to keep score. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to find out what was going on in that kid's life, why he wasn't respecting me. And the mom said to me, he lost his father a month ago.
Oh, wow.
Person first, player second. Because if I don't develop the person, you will never become the best player in life or in a sport. I would tie kids' shoes, not just to tie the shoe, but to learn about that kid. Sometimes a kid would have a hard time making a basket. So I said, okay, everybody move out of free throw line. I'm going to lift him up and let him drop the ball in the hoop, and you can rebound, but don't guard him. I did these little things as object lessons. Everybody needs a lift in life. Some of those kids are some good athletes today. And I still have contact with some of their parents. And they remember those moments because the minute that ball went in the hoop, where do you think the kid was looking? At the stands for the parent. Because next time I had the kid come down, I didn't lift him up that time. I just had him dribble, said nobody guard him, but use the fundamentals of rebound. And 89% of the times I make the basket. But those are things in life across the board that help people. It's like I made a comment in that video about my third grade teacher. When I came here to Austria, English was my second. I didn't know a bit of English. It's all German. my third grade teacher kept me back.
Mm.
Not because I was dumb, but she knew I needed another step, take a step back so I could take 2 steps forward.
Mm.
She had enough fortitude to say, let's keep him back here so he can get this into his head. Or can we guide him? I think sometimes we look at setbacks as a detriment rather than a benefit.
I can relate to that. I was held back in the 5th grade as well. And I'm not sure that I was held back because it was a language problem. It was just a, focus problem back then. I struggled with focus. And, I think for a number of years that really did weigh on me. But, then I had a teacher when I was in high school who said, man, you're a remarkable writer. You're doing great. And somebody believed in me.
Right.
It made a huge difference in my life.
And see, I think that's the fundamental thing. Believe in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
All lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking on the radio the other day with a gentleman, and I made a comment to him. He says, I wake up to the fresh breath of Christ's love in my life.
Mm.
He gives me the ability so that I can breathe.
Mm.
And that's what we need to do on a daily basis is present God's truth in every breath we take.
Mm.
I'm thinking the passage in Corinthians. My life is a letter to those I come in contact with. I love the way the Message says, interprets or paraphrases Romans 12:1-2. You will be changed from the inside out. One of the biggest challenges I learned in being in an academic setting in Western Corbin, there was a lot of intelligent people, a lot of head knowledge. How much that knowledge went to the heart?
That's really the hard thing, isn't it?
I think because I have a friend who's a great communicator. I love the guy, but I think his agenda sometimes misses the purpose because he focuses on race rather than relationship. I think it's so important in the dynamics of my coaching years, my reffing years. I've had people just slam me and try to start a fight with me. I don't go there. I say, okay, help me understand what I did wrong. And help me, you understand what I interpreted that to be. That's why I don't leave the gym. I have conversation with people saying, well, you call a foul on my kid. He's 6 foot tall, and the other kid's 1 foot tall, or 3 foot tall.
Right.
Why don't you call over the back? And I said, I don't, because he's not displacing the person. That's a fundamental rule.
Right.
And in sports, that is the rule we see as we make a millisecond decision that can have a life-changing attitude.
Yeah.
And I will stop kids and say, okay, buddy, it's not the call, it's your attitude. You're going to be my doctor, and I don't want a jerk. And I think in this process of life, we need to have this hard conversation with people because we have to learn to agree to disagree. But we need to learn from the past so we can live in the present and in the future. Because those are all reminders. Scripture from Genesis 1 to Revelations is full of all these stories of failures, of people that let God down, people that murdered, people that did all sorts of disgusting things. But God's grace and mercy was constantly present. There's so many theological differences. I don't understand it all. But what I do is understand is God's unconditional love. And Corinthians 13 says, if I have all knowledge and have all prophecy, but don't have love, I lose my message. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to rub shoulders with those we may be uncomfortable with. But through the grace and power of God, we can impact society, whether it's race, whether it's a class system, whether it's academia knowledge and knowledge. I mean, I work with handicapped kids, special needs kids that were they had an IQ maybe 60. And trying to educate the common person about their skill level sometimes was a challenge. And I was my job was to get job for these kids. And I went to this employer and said, well, we can't handle these kids in our facility because they don't know their stuff. They're dangerous. Mm. And I said, okay, but I just wanted to see if there's an opportunity available for me. And he said to me, we can't take that risk. Okay. A couple of days later, he had a situation where he had to come to our classroom. And he wanted to see what we did. He wanted to show us a project. And I said, well, this is what we do. A week later, he hired a person. Mm. I didn't close the door. I left it open for an opportunity so you could see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And we need to do that in our daily lives with the people we rub shoulders with. It's just like with the gay lifestyle and those kind of things. A lot of those people have pain in their life. Yeah. Love the sin, hate the sin, love the sinner. And in order to understand it, sometimes we have to have those tough conversations. Why are you where you're at today? What is that pain in your life that causes you to be there? I've gone through a couple divorces. I'm not proud of that. They're painful experiences. I have some ownership in that. Mm-hmm. I wasn't carrying my load. I failed. But that's the time I needed my brothers and sisters in my life, and they turned their back on me.
Oh. Well, that really gets to the conversation that we want to have about the church and the attitudes that we see in the church. I don't know what things have changed in our society.
Oh, big time.
And things have changed in our church, but the question is, do we still have those problems? It's not a problem of skin, it's a problem of sin. We still have the sin problem, and it does create a problem for us. So what problems are there in our churches that you see from your perspective, and what can we do to bring reconciliation, and what can we do to respond to the prejudice and discrimination that we might see around us today?
I think listen with an open heart, with an open mind. Listen, not to give a response, listen to hear somebody's story. Everybody in life has a story. Everybody. And that story comes in their way, in different ways, sometimes through aggressive discipline, sometimes just through a parent's response to a negative situation in life. We're disciplined in different ways. And unfortunately, we're a byproduct of our society. And so sometimes those things stem up to how we see God. I have a great brother in Oregon who struggled with the writings of Paul. Mm. And I asked him, what's going on? He goes, well, my dad was a strong disciplinarian. Mm. And you look at the way Paul was very rigid. In his thinking. And so it just took some time to understand where he's coming from, because that was such a foreign concept. But people were shunning him because of his honesty. Mm. I appreciated his honesty. And I think that's one of those things that we can be all theologically correct, but we don't approach theology in love. Mm. We miss the opportunity. And so we can't go about being so pharisaical. So, well, I don't have this problem. For all have sinned. There's no subtitles.
Yeah, right.
And it comes back to the point in time, because once you become arrogant, you lose the connection or the opportunity to share. And I think we have to be so intentional about not always being right, but having the right to learn. Because if you're always right, you never learn. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to become a better husband, be a better person. My daughter and our relationship is strained. I don't have all the answers, but I put them in the hands of God. And I think one of the dangers is we try to be helicopter parents. Mm-hmm. The best people in my life were Sunday school teachers, were coaches, were other people that were allowed in my life that helped me understand what mom and dad are telling us, or telling me. They didn't only tell me what I wanted to hear, they told me what I needed to hear. And sometimes we need to hear those stories of pain, of discouragement, of hopelessness, so that we can teach others and learn to be more sensitive. I have a lot of Pete-isms. Here's one. It's called hope, or hopes. Helping others persevere in every situation.
That's a good one.
Because go ahead.
That's a great acronym.
Because that's what my parents did for us in Austria, in the orphanage. We were seen as outcasts by society. I forget the writer, but he made this comment. It says, the world is changed by our example, not by our opinions. And be an example of Christ when the opinions of society differ. Because I think there's a lot of excuses made today, and we try to meld everything into one agenda. And we're not using the right platform to do that. But it starts by don't isolate yourself. Engage in the lives of other people. And that's the tough thing, is how do we engage in a proactive, humble way? You know, one of the things I was looking at, I just try to kind of look at, okay, what are some of the fundamental aspects of life? And I think one of the things my parents taught me early in life are the ABCs of life. What is my attitude? What are my thoughts? How are my thoughts being created to be a critical thinker? What's my behavior? What are my actions towards situations? Do I empower people or do I enable people? And the C is, what's my character? Does it reflect Christ or does it reflect circumstances? Because sometimes those circumstances are beyond our control. But Christ, through his grace and mercy, allows us to see the circumstances as hopes to help other people. And I think that's one of the principles my parents instilled in my life. It's not color. It's not culture. It's your character that's going to define you. But that character comes about with intentional conversations, asking the hard questions. Why do you think the way you do? Look at how many churches we have.
Yeah.
And they're a byproduct of disarray in the church itself. We have First Baptist, Second Baptist, Third Baptist, Pentecostal. I mean, we have all these churches.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are created because of dissension or misunderstandings. And that was one of my eye-opening experience even went to Corbin. Is I went to an interdenominational church. I go, oh, there's Christians on the other side of the world. You know, I learned to understand that there's different ways to coming to Christ because it's called a personal relationship. And I cannot be the judge how people come to Christ. I can be the influence of that by my action and interaction with the people I come in contact with.
Well, maybe, Pete, you can sum it all up. You know, we talked about, you know, there's a problem today, obviously. So we started off talking about the craziness in our world around us, and we're talking about your story and how God led you into really, it's a personal thing, fixing that whole situation of race, color, and ethnicity. It's a responsibility thing, a heart thing for God. And then we talked about what the church can do. Maybe you can just sum it up and tell us, give us some encouraging words on what we can do um, in the relationship that we have toward other people.
I think understanding where people are coming from takes active listening. Don't listen to give an answer. Listen to understand where people are coming from. You know, there's this concept, like when you deal with management situation, have a 24-hour period before you respond. Think some of these things through. Learn to be a critical thinker. Ask people to question your preaching. That's the tough one.
Yeah.
Challenge the Sunday school teacher. I remember giving a lesson in Sunday school lesson one time, and we had a couple of kids that their parents were getting a divorce. And people really struggle with that. And I used the analogy I was kind of criticized for, but I gave it anyway. I said, well, did your parents speed to go to work to church today? Sin comes in all forms. Don't be so self-righteous that you can't reach. I mean, Scripture's clear. Study the Scriptures to see if they're true. You know, understand where people are coming from so you hear and you can have this dialogue that helps you empower one another so that you can be the best that you can be by building up the body of Christ to be a whole body that accepts people where they're at, recognizing God's grace, mercy, unconditional love, and forgiveness for all. Not just for you or me, but for all. And look at yourself in the mirror. Have I been the Christ to somebody else? Because I face that every day. My wife reminds me of my inadequacies. Not in a begrudging way, but saying, you know, be the better person. I've got flaws. Be transparent in that approach.
Yeah, it's not so much about race, it's about we're people.
We're part of the human race.
And
For God so loved the world.
And I think that humility of Christ that you're talking about, not being so high and mighty that I'm right and you're wrong, but being humble, a humble individual, and being willing to listen, really key things, building those relationships that you talked about.
Well, I think I lost my dad a year ago. And I define his discipline style as he taught me with tough love and practical guidance. And that practical guidance was the ability to listen and don't make everything dramatic.
That's a big deal. That is a big deal.
Because we dramatize everything because of media today. And so much is what we see what defines us rather than what we listen to, what's not being said. Listen to one another with a humble heart. For God so loved the world, for all have sinned.
Yeah.
And there's no subtitles.
All inclusive.
Yep. And I think that's so easily forgotten. And I think you have to recognize where people are coming from. But as a lot of these professional athletes are all bent out of shape about certain things, be aware of your platform and see where you can make a difference. Recognize that life isn't fair. Wear a crash helmet. You know, look at those things in life and put on your thinking cap of critical thinking. Did these things occur? I know they did. I can't answer for everybody.
No.
But I can't live in the past. I've got to press forward to continue to make a difference for his glory, not for my glory. And I think that gets lost because there's some signs in our society that help us appreciate the freedoms that we have. But the most important is the freedom we have in Christ, that we can love one another as Christ loved you and me.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber meets the road. Because if I can love people as Christ loves me, I have no arguing point, because I'm a sinner saved by grace.
Yeah.
We're all sinners saved by grace. And that's the bottom line. Be willing to be in a crowd and say, hey, buddy, I appreciate it, but you're a little out of line.
Yeah.
And that's what I do with my lifesavers. We're here to save lives and help people make wise choices. We can help the process or hurt the process.
Well, thanks, Pete, for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it. Great perspective. The different Christianities are difference makers. Really, we can be. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And the difference that we
Right.
make, we understand it's not about skin, it's about sin. It's not about race. The solution is grace. And so turning people to Jesus Christ and humbly doing so, I think the one thing I've really learned from you in the several conversations that we've had and watching you on some of your videos is that one of the most important things we can do is develop a relationship with other people. Is to
big time.
offer them.
If you isolate yourself, you never learn. And that's kind of the charm, because some people have been so hurt by others, they're afraid to get out of that shell because they're in a protective cocoon. Recognize that and don't force that, because that can be just as devastating. Because it's just like when I worked for Children's Services Division in Oregon, and I had some classmates say, well, what are you working for CSD for? They just take people and don't allow people to go to, they don't let people go to church, or they don't force that. Well, maybe that's the place that person got abused.
Could be.
And so that may just trigger bigger issues. So don't judge a book by its cover. Read it. Read the lives you come in contact with. And I've been blessed over my 40 years in ref and to see a lot of lives, a lot of hurting people. And hopefully in some way I've made a difference in their lives and continue to.
Well, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, thanks for the tough questions.
Yeah.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Learned a lot. And we'll just, now we've got a new perspective of you, a new perspective of what's going on in your life. It's been a long time since we've seen each other.
Right. But I'm thankful for people like Bob Denayan and people like that were willing to be my mentor and help me look at life outside my own comfort level.
Yeah, Bob has been bugging me lately.
Well, he's had some challenges in his life, but his faith is so strong.
He's come alongside of me, and recently in particular, during this COVID thing, he's given me things to think about. And he has been an encouragement when times were tough, and really appreciate Bob.
And we have a lot of brothers and sisters like that in our lives. And we need to be more willing to listen, not to what we want to hear, but what we need to hear.
Yeah. Bob has been gracious and gentle.
Yes. And I think that's what separates the men from the boys. If we're always right, you never learn.
Yeah.
And don't become so academically focused that you forget about your attitude.
Yeah.
Because you miss a lot of opportunities to grow for him.
Well, I used to have a lot to be proud of. Used to think I was pretty smart, used to think I was doing well. And, God chose circumstances in my life to bring about some humility. I'm sure that I need a little bit more than what I've got. But it's not about being smart. It's not about being theologically on top of your game all the time. It's really God's God's really wanting us to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit and the love of Christ.
Look at the people God used.
Mm-hmm.
Fishermen,
Mm.
David, Noah,
Yeah.
Jonah.
All troubled individuals, all of them.
See, and I think the message of the church
Mm-hmm.
is humble confidence.
Mm.
Recognizing it's only by the grace of God
Mm-hmm.
that each one of us have an opportunity to serve him.
Yeah.
And honor that.
Well, thanks so much. And we'll do this again sometime.
Awesome. God bless you, my brother.
You too.